Hi, this is Freeman Sullivan. I'm here at room 301 at the Department of Public Health. Glad you're watching. I have to be a little quiet here because the hearing's going on inside. But I'm going to go inside here and watch this is the Department Mental Health Board, and there will be testimony here today regarding police use of tasers and making arrests. So be patient during the hearing. I know it's kind of boring and dry, but I'm sure the taser testimony will be interesting. So I want to go inside.
Schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, clinical depression. They are brain disorders. People with severe mental illness are, however, a heterogeneous group. Most are able to recognize that they have a mental illness, recognizing they're able to avail themselves of the services that are available for them. But many have a biologically predetermined inability to recognize or consistently recognize their condition, linked to frontal lobe dysfunction and brain abnormalities, not recognizing that they're ill. They understandably do not consistently engage in community mental health treatment. There is a term for this. Took me a long time to learn how to pronounce it. Anosognosia. Anosognosia. What it is the inability of the brain to self-recognize. Simply put, my brain can diagnose when my leg is broken, but my leg cannot take over for the computer of the body. Instead, I saw they're in front of this building sleeping tonight. They're in the park across the street. They're homeless, they're victimized, they're in jail and revolving through the hospitals. Our jails can't handle them. Our state hospitals are now pretty much only available for folks who have been charged or found to be not guilty by reason of insanity of the crime. And that is just too late. Our ERs are in crisis. Something has to change. I know it's a hard decision, but as a society, it is our responsibility to help, even if it does take that hard decision. Thank you very much for allowing me to present. What I'd like to do is go over the particulars of what California's assisted outpatient treatment law is all about. The law is really very simple. It's used in many vicinities throughout the United States, and here in California, most notably in Nevada County. First, a request is made. The request can be made by a family member, by a law enforcement officer, by a treatment provider, by a significant other. The request goes to the Director of Behavioral Health, who in Nevada County is Michael Haggerty, to investigate, to see whether there is credence. Michael has contracted with Turning Point. Turning Point is a pretty well-known nonprofit here in Northern California. I'm sure many of you are aware of it. It does assertive community treatment in Sacramento County, Yolo County, Stanislaus County, and a couple others that I can't really remember. Michael has said that he would be more than willing to speak with any of your administrators to understand how the law is applied and how it has helped him not only take control of his budget, but save lives. The criteria, the investigation, is based on pretty simple criteria. And that criteria is, does the person have a defined serious mental illness? Has that person been revolving through hospitalizations, jailings, or threats of extreme danger to themselves or others? Is the person decompensating? Is it likely that the person is not going to be able to safely survive in the community without more? And likely that person is going to end up 5150 again and back into the hospital. To make this assessment, Carol Stanchfield from Turning Point, the program director, has a very dedicated team of people. It is not their goal to put people under a court order of Laura's Law or AOT. It is their goal to try and help that individual. Now, these are individuals that are known. They've been in the hospital. They've been offered services. But sometimes that intensive outreach, that continual outreach, is going to help, and that's what Carol tries to do. They get out within 24 hours to do the assessment. They try to get the individual, they help the individual re-engage in the voluntary community services. They may help the person find another place to live, take the person to a psychiatrist, pick up medication, deliver medication, figure out what it is that that person needs to really be able to gain their own road of recovery. And they don't stop. They're 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Daily visits, weekly visits, daily calls. They're there to help that person and their family. Unfortunately, because of the extent of illness that the population we're talking about may be experiencing, not everybody is able to engage voluntarily. And if that person is decompensating further, and if that person is going to be hitting the hospital soon, or worse, then Michael Hagerty will petition the court for a direct order. But even with that petition, there is more that goes on. There is a treatment plan. The individual is encouraged to self-engage in the development of that treatment plan. Michael Hagerty has to do something that is very unusual. With the petition, with the treatment plan, he has to say that his department will provide the services that person needs for the duration of the order. So it's the treatment, the plan, and the order. When that petition is filed, there's two things that immediately happen. The person is assigned a public defender. The public defender is there to make sure that their rights are protected and the due process occurs. The second thing that occurs is, once again, they're given the opportunity to voluntarily engage through what is known as a voluntary settlement order. That voluntary settlement order still has the client-driven treatment plan attached, but it means that the person doesn't have to go to court. And usually the people will sign this voluntary settlement agreement. But it has the same effect as the direct court order. But, and I agree with this, we deserve our day in court. And if the person does want to go to court, then it goes before Judge Thomas Anderson, who's the presiding judge of Nevada County. Judge Anderson it's not an adversarial process. It's a therapeutic jurisprudence. Tom is there to make sure that the criteria is there, that the person really does need Lohr's Law. But he's also there to be an advocate for the person. If the person is objecting to aspects of the treatment plan, Tom listens and he hears and he negotiates with the person and he negotiates with the service team until they are in agreement that this is what is needed, that this person wants these services, needs these services, and understands what they're all about. Occasionally, even with the direct order, through the person not engaging, or through the very nature of the illness and the symptoms accelerating, a person does go downhill. And with the direct order, the treatment team can place that person into the hospital before they reach the level of 5150. If that person is decompensating, and if it is likely that that person is going to be unsafe in the community. So this is an earlier intervention. It's not waiting for danger. It's not waiting for the danger that is so frequently too late. The danger that leaves people dead in our alleys, victimized by others because their mental illness has not allowed them to protect themselves, or in our state hospitals, or in our jails, because their danger went over the line from treatment to criminalization. I think the very unique aspect of California's assisted outpatient treatment is the fact that there is accountability. Judge Anderson does direct the person to take treatment, but he directs the system also to make sure that they give the services that are needed. Nevada County has thrived under this accountability. For every $1 that they invested in Lohr's Law programs, they have saved $1.81 in reduced hospitalizations and jails. That represents not only a lot of money saved, but a lot of lives saved. What is the difference between just the intensive case management services of a full service partnership and assisted outpatient treatment? It is the therapeutic jurisprudence. Nevada County's experience has proven what has been studied throughout the United States. In October 2010, Columbia University also again replicated this study. For this extremely ill population, services alone, court order alone, are not as effective as court order and services combined. You see this already in your mental health court. Very interestingly, the recipients of the AOT in that study reported greater self-esteem and less stigma than their non-AOT counterparts. And you know what? That makes sense. Because when a person is well, they're not showing the stigmata of our neglect. They're able to function better, they're able to have a better life. An example, one lady in Nevada County, I'll call her Mary. She had been in and out of the hospital. She didn't recognize she had an illness. For the past 2 years, she had generally resided in an IMD. This time, when she came out, instead of just saying, go take your services, go see these people, she was put on Lohr's Law. And now she is working, She is living in her own home, and she is thriving. I think the statistics are most likely well known. Nevada County is achieving the same results as what the previous study showed. 77% fewer psychiatric hospitalizations, 74% reduction in homelessness, 83% decline in arrest, 87% decline in incarceration. That's a lot fewer visits to the ER, the jails, the hospitals, and it's scant resources that will help us save a lot more lives. AOT does require the system to do things a bit differently. It does bring accountability into the system, which otherwise for this population sometimes is not there. It gives very ill people the help and the support they need to recover and stay well in the community. It makes for a more effective, less costly system. Most importantly, it's compassionate and it saves lives. You know, we can oppose ideologically. Nobody ever wants to take away somebody's rights. But if I was going to define the difference between civil rights and society's responsibility to help, it would be this. If the person recognizes they have an illness, can weigh the benefits and the detriments of treatment and the consequences of their choice, then we as a society have absolutely no right to intervene. They have the right to their choice and the responsibility of the consequences. But if the person can't recognize they have an illness, therefore weigh the benefits and the detriments of treatment, then we as a society live together to help and protect. And it would only be equitable if we started helping and protecting this population too. Frankly, it's time, and we just can't afford their neglect anymore. So I want to thank you very much, and I'll be pleased to entertain questions.
Okay, we have 10 minutes for the board to ask questions before Ms. Yes.
Hi, my name is Lewis, assistant. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry. If you look at the history of psychiatric treatment, I mean, long before Laura's Law, sadly, there's a history of abuse, a history of almost excessive force applied to required treatment. Of course, there was a turnaround in the latter half of after 1970 and 1980, hopefully starting maybe even in the 1950s. But it seems some might think of Laura's Law as almost a move backward. What sort of protections do you see in place to prevent the kind of abuses that have historically occurred with forced treatment?
You know, there is more protection in Laura's Law than in most treatment laws. First of all, there's the public defender, there's the judge, there's the oversight of a treatment team rather than one individual leveraging the person to behave, if you will. And this much I can tell you, the rights within Laura's Law are substantially more than the rights to die on the streets.
I'm Terrence Patterson. Thank you for your eloquent presentation. Do you know of estimates of what it would take in terms of resources for San Francisco to implement Laura's Law?
Laura's Law is not a program. What it is a combination of services that you're already giving, you're already paying for, and a court order. An assertive community treatment team, I know San Francisco's too expensive for me to live here, but I think it's around $20,000 a year. That's what is fairly typical, $22,000 a year. But when you consider how much it costs, what is an IMD now? 100,000, 75,000. A hospital bed, if we have a hospital bed, hospital beds have gone down by 30% in the past 10 years. They are priceless resources. It is cost effective because the person is in the community. They're not in the expensive institutions. And they can be helped to apply for SSI, Medi-Cal. They're not going to be on the indigent line. They can work, they can contribute. And so what is the cost for San Francisco? Start at one person at a time, and you can save those funds. It isn't something that has to be done mass. It can be started one person at a time, and then one person can save another person.
Any more questions from the board? Okay.
I'm not all that familiar with Moore's Law, but my understanding is that what's controversial about it is the use. Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Virginia Lewis. That's what is controversial about it is not the services, but rather the use of psychiatric drugs as mandatory. And I just, I'm not critical necessarily.
Yeah, I think this is an exceedingly important point. First of all, forced medication. Involuntarily administered medication can only be done in a licensed treatment facility. It is a medical procedure that is fraught with danger. And if there was any law that allowed somebody to be forcibly medicated, involuntarily medicated in the community, I would be advocating against the law. Medication can, however, be part of the court order. And so it is part of the treatment plan. Medication can be supervised, the person can be helped to get it, but the person cannot be forced to take it in the community. Usually they will. But if they're not taking their medication, they can't be put in the hospital just because they're not taking their medication. They have to be deteriorating to the point where they're going to be unsafe in the community. And so I can understand why medication is a controversial issue. It should be.
David Elliott Lewis again. Could a court order also require electroconvulsive therapy?
I don't think electroconvulsive therapy can be done involuntarily in California. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I don't think it can be. Again, no, not under Moore's Law.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So Mrs. Sandman?
Just a second.
Expected to start this way, but I do want to say that Carla had started making an assertion about something that I have to say that I not only totally in disagreement about, I think it's an extremely extreme point of view, and not shared by probably the larger mental health community, which is that there's a biologically predetermined frontal lobe dysfunction that causes you not to understand that you're mentally ill. I don't know that, I mean, I want you to think about this. This is like a catch-22. It goes back to almost 50 years ago when if you said you were not mentally ill, it meant you were mentally ill. It is very, very dangerous. I'm very concerned that I heard it, and I just wanted to bring to your attention exactly what she said, that if you feel that you are not mentally ill, that is a sign of your mental illness, and that she believes there's a biologically predetermined frontal lobe dysfunction that's causing you to come to that conclusion. She and I do agree on some things. I do understand about the suffering that's out there, about the homelessness, about people with mental health issues that are homeless, don't have jobs, are suffering, have experienced great trauma. We have different solutions to those problems. So I have a basic premise. And instead of just coming from me, I wanted to read some quotes because I think the quotes say it better and have more authority behind them. One is from the Mental Health Report of the Surgeon General. It was published in 1999, so it's from the Surgeon General's report, which is that almost all agree that coercion should not be a substitute for effective care that is sought voluntarily. The other is in 2000 from the Little Hoover Commission and a report called Being There, Making a Commitment to Mental Health. Inadequate access to voluntary care should not warrant the use of involuntary care. I think for the first time in our state, we are beginning to have we're beginning to have access to adequate care with the Mental Health Services Act. The institutionalization did not fail, it was never completed. And what we need is voluntary, person-centered, holistic services that deal with the whole human being. And they can be done in a voluntary way because they are being done in a voluntary way by the Mental Health Services Act. They can't serve, it's still not enough money. I mean, the amount of money is a lot of money in the Mental Health Services Act, but it's not enough to serve everybody. But not having available or voluntary services is not an excuse to promote coercion or even to go in the direction of coercion. The direction has to be more voluntary, holistic services, person-centered, recovery-based services. The statistics there are early statistics from the Mental Health Services Act are the same statistics that Carla talked about, which just tell me that you don't have to force somebody to have wraparound, holistic services that are person-centered and have those kinds of results. There's a Petrus study that talks about incredible increase in homelessness. The proportion of consumers living independently after 12 months, this was a study of full-service partnerships, is approximately 20% more than what it used to be. People are using 67% less emergency services and incarceration, and being incarcerated. Employment outcomes were improved by 25% over 12 months. This is the early days of the Mental Health Services Act, so you have to expect what it's going to look like in another 5 years. Consumers were more likely to start educational programs. What they call functioning was better than previously. And overall outcomes such as problem solving, self-control were improved in some clients by 30%. There's also a UCLA study that states pretty much the same thing. So you're beginning to get those kinds of results from the Mental Health Services Act, which is voluntary, which is really transformational. California has, is creating a model for the whole country. So I want to now talk about 1421 and about outpatient commitment and about coercion and why we should avoid it at all costs and why we need it, because I don't think we do. Firstly, it is not assisted outpatient commitment, it is really involuntary outpatient commitment. Sometimes the words are sugar-coated. It is outpatient commitment. It's exactly what happens in the hospital, but it's in the community. The criteria are very, very, very loose through which somebody can be outpatient committed. It is not dangerous to yourself or others or gravely disabled. It is based pretty much on whether you're unlikely to survive safely in the community without supervision, and based on past episodes of violence or threats of violence, or being incarcerated, or being in a mental hospital. So it is literally somebody could be outpatient committed and not be a danger to themselves or others or gravely disabled. So the net is huge. If it were used in California, which it really isn't, it could catch many, many, many people. And it is not that well used. I mean, in 10 years since 2001, almost 11 years, involuntary outpatient commitment has been used, in my understanding, on 4 people. I think that says a lot. That first, the mental health community doesn't want it. I'm not just talking about consumers, I'm talking about providers, I'm talking about the administrators. I thought about that, and then I was doing research on other states and other places, and it's a pattern. 44 states, many states have outpatient commitment now, but very, very few actually use it, maybe 7 or 8, I'm not exactly sure of the amount. And then I thought about New York State, because it's pretty famous for its Kendra's Law, and then I learned that 70% of outpatient commitment, well, 70% of outpatient commitment incidences were in New York City, and what they call upstate very rarely use it, and when they do, it is the voluntary, enhanced involuntary engagement. So outpatient commitment, although it is law in many states, although it's the law here, is not used often, and I think there's a reason for that people just don't want to use it, and there's something that basically they feel is a problem with it, and that's the coercion. One of the reasons why people promote outpatient commitment or even forced treatment is that what they call noncompliance, that people are noncompliant and therefore they have to be forced to treatment. I believe that forced treatment can create noncompliance. I know there's a study done many years ago called the Wellbeing Project, in which 55% of those people asked the question said that they avoided treatment in the future because of their experiences with forced treatment. And I know it's my case. I don't often talk about this because my experience was many, many years ago, almost 40 years ago. And I spent the last almost 40 years trying to change the mental health system so people that won't experience what I experienced, that people that come after me won't have the same experiences. Opening up the mental health system for them. I know I will never go through those doors. I couldn't because of my experience 40 years ago. So forced treatment is not the answer to noncompliance. In many cases, it creates noncompliance. I think coerciveness undermines the therapeutic relationship, and maybe that's why it's done so rarely. That therapists, providers, professionals really don't like it because it interferes with their relationship with the person they're trying to help. I also believe that choice and self-determination is, I think it's essential. I think civil rights are essential to recovery. I don't think they're antithetical. I have read where some people consider self-control and self-determination as an indicator of mental health. So why would you take control and self-determination away from someone and think that you're helping them? Again, with my own experience, at a time when I was losing control over my life, I needed to have someone allow me to have more control. Instead, they took it away. I do think that self-determination and choice and enabling and empowering somebody to exercise self-determination and choice are essential for recovery. Finally, there are some myths about people with mental disabilities and mental health issues which underpin and are really the basic thing that is promoting outpatient commitment and in fact promotes coercion. One is the myth of the violent mental patient. I again would like to go to some quotes because I've been doing this for a long time now, and almost decade after decade, there's some research about the link between violence and people with mental health issues, and every single time they disprove the link. That people with mental health issues are no more violent than their comparable neighbors, and that kind of result comes over and over and over again, from decade to decade. This is from MacArthur Violence Risk Assessment Study in 1999. The prevalence of violence among people who have been discharged from a hospital and who do not have symptoms or substance abuse is about the same as the prevalence of violence among other people living in their communities who do not have symptoms of substance abuse. 2002, our findings suggest that serious violence is the rare exception among all people with psychiatric disabilities. The public perception that people who are mentally ill or typically violent is unfounded. 2009, I mean, you just keep going. Mental illness alone does not increase the risk of violence. And yet, the people that are promoting 1421 are using the myth of the violent mental patient to promote it. I think of all the things that upset me, that upsets me the most. I know people can disagree about coercion and the need for coercion. They can disagree about the etiology of what this thing called mental health problems is from. But to use a myth to promote a position by saying that we are violent is so antithetical to our recovery. This myth of the violent mental patient makes it difficult for us with housing, to get jobs, to assimilate into society, all kinds of ways. One of the promoters of 1421 back 2001, 2000 in New York City, he was promoting at that time Kendra's Law. His name was DJ Jaffe. He was an advertising executive. And this is a quote from him. From a marketing perspective, it may be necessary to capitalize on the fear of violence to get the law passed. And that's what happened, and that's what they did. I have other quotes from Jaffe. I think it was many, many years ago at an Army annual conference in which he said he had an epiphany. He was at a housing march or rally, and he realized that people don't care about housing, they don't care about mental illness, they care about public safety. And so he said, so if you're changing your laws in your states, you have to understand that. Now once you understand that, it means that you have to take the debate out of the mental health arena and put it in the criminal justice, public safety arena, and that is what has happened with 1421 and other attempts in our state and across the country to push coercion and involuntary treatment. That is clearly one of the myths that coercion and forced treatment rests on. The other is the incompetent mental patient, that we can't make decisions for ourselves. And again, research refutes that. That by and large, we have the same capabilities as anybody else to make decisions about our lives and our treatments. And then the third, it's almost to me like a stool with three legs: violent mental patient, incompetent mental patient. These are myths, they aren't true. And the drugs work all the time and they're safe. You put those three things together and the conclusion would be coercion and forced treatment. Well, the drugs don't work all the time. I mean, any consumer in this audience would tell you that. Some work, some don't. There are long-term use of the medications can cause extreme, I don't know, side effects. Somebody once said that they are the effects, but they want to call them side effects. We all know that now, people with mental health problems die, 20, 25 years earlier than the rest of the population. We have diabetes, overweight, lots of things caused by the medications. So they don't always work, and I would say that they're not safe. I certainly have people make an informed, there has to be an informed choice of whether they want to take drugs or not, medications or not, but they should be informed of the risks, and that is their choice. I want to talk a little about the research. Carla mentioned about the research, that some research has shown the effectiveness of outpatient commitment, and especially in New York there has been a study from Duke University. In 1998, New York State, as it was considering outpatient commitment, did a 3-year pilot study. It was called Stedman et al. Did a Bellevue Hospital study in which they studied people who had the same services, the same holistic, person-centered, recovery-based services. One group was voluntary and one group was court-ordered, and they didn't see any difference. So they could not, the court order didn't add anything. Their assessment was that it was the services that made the difference. In 2001, in California, when this issue was raging in our capital, the state Senate commissioned a study by Rand, and they came up with the same conclusion, that there was no evidence that the court order added anything. That the services certainly made a difference, but there was no evidence that the court order or the force of the services added anything. And recently I've talked to some friends of mine in New York, because there was a Duke study that had these statistics about how successful outpatient commitment had been for some individuals. And he pointed me to the study in which the study itself says that they had the available data allow only a limited assessment of whether voluntary agreements are effective alternatives. So they didn't study, they studied the services under a court order, they did not study the services without the court order. So, yeah, I think we all agree that services make a difference. Everybody knows that. The precursor to the Mental Health Services Act was AB 2034. Incredible results. 60 and 70% reduction in homelessness, reduction in incarceration, reduction in state hospital use, people going to work, people having homes. Wraparound, person-centered, recovery-based, holistic services work. They do not have to be forced. And in California, we have started an experiment in which they are not forced. That's the other thing about New York. So many people use New York as a reason why we in California should pursue outpatient commitment. We aren't New York, we're California. New York passed this Kendra's Law, outpatient commitment, and then put millions and millions and millions of dollars into services to follow the law. So if you want really good services in New York, Kendra's Law is a way to access them. We went a different way. We created Prop 63, many of us together, Mental Health Services Act, with funds supporting it and behind it. That's the direction we should go. That's the direction we are going. And it's a noble, transformational experiment that we've got to continue. And there's something else about the Mental Health Services Act, is that we all work together. I mean, I know mental health boards are made up of consumers and family members and providers. We were in literally battle over outpatient commitment and coercion. It is extremely divisive. It is not a battle I want to go back into again. But wow, were we together when we were talking about AB 34 and 2034. And when we came together to pursue and write, I was in the state level then with the California Network of Mental Health Clients and was part of assisting in the crafting of the Mental Health Services Act. We all work together, family members, consumers, providers, administrators, everybody, because this was something we could share and agree on. That's when we get things done, when we work together, not when we're divided. And this subject of outpatient commitment, of coercion is divisive. You know, I'm much older than I was. It's about 36 years ago when I got involved, when I exited my experience with, quote, mental health treatment. And I don't want to go to battle again. But every time this issue comes up, we have to, because it affects our life and our liberty. It affects our self-determination and choice, and I think it affects our recovery. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I'll just talk loud. Can you all hear me?
Not
I'm
well.
going to play the devil's advocate for a second.
Okay.
Given that there was only 4 uses of the law, using that counter argument, if it's used so infrequently because there is so much concern about its inappropriateness, then why be that concerned given only 4 uses in a state of almost 40 million people?
For over 12 years.
Yes.
Concern is because I think the proponents are trying to change that, are trying to get other cities like San Francisco and Alameda County and other counties to implement it. Because the issue isn't dying. You could ask the question of the proponents of it. Why are you still pushing it? Why didn't it sunset? I mean, it wasn't used. It was used for 4 people for 10 years. Why would you just let it die? I think whenever there are those kinds of laws in the book, we have to be vigilant about them.
Sort of like a slippery slope, is that what your concern is?
I would think so.
They allow it, then it could get worse. Like a slippery slope, it could get worse.
Anybody else? Any more? Okay, I have a question, please.
Yes.
Laura Arguelles, and as a family member. First thing, I would like to clarify what you said about that the mentally challenged people, when they refuse to take medication, because there's a term for that, because they're not aware of their mental illness, And so you need to say, when my daughter refuses to take medication, she is really aware that she is aware that she's mentally ill, but then she just refuses to take it and she deteriorates. Is that, there is a term, yes. And the term is that they are not aware of their illness. And that's one question, and I would like to ask another, please.
My position is, can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
No, you said that you disagreed with Ms. Jacobs
I
about
disagreed.
that. Yes.
Yes.
And so I'm just wondering, can you give me then a more clarification of the action that my daughter normally does? She refused to take medication, and then because of the law, they could not force her, and even when she deteriorated too badly, they could not still, so that nobody could force her. To the point that what had happened is that because she was so gravely ill already, and she cannot be forced, they criminalized her. The police came, and she was in prison. That's the point that I'm trying to figure out. What What, could you please clarify what?
Yeah, okay, what I was saying that, what Carla had talked about was what she believes is a biologically, condition that, literally a mental illness with a name, that causes people not to understand that they're mentally ill and therefore not to accept treatment. And it is very hard for me to accept that. I think people have real reasons for not taking medication because of the way the medication can make you feel. And there are also other ways of approaching and addressing. I can't, it's hard to talk about a specific person, your daughter, and I know that is hard, and I'm a mother too, and had a daughter who was physically ill, and I know how, I can feel how you would suffer about it. But I believe that there are other ways of talking and being with somebody and assisting them that enhances their decision making. And maybe it would be, once that decision making is enhanced, to take medication. But there are real reasons that people decide not to take medication because of the effects of the medication. I mean, the risks as opposed to the benefits, there's a real debate about that, and each person has to make it.
Okay, Dr. Patterson? Thank you.
I'd like to make a brief comment about that point. There are numerous reasons people don't take medication. And to my mind, your comment about agnosia. I used to think agnosia was that Mayor Agnos didn't know what he was doing.
He didn't.
But it may or may not be biologically determined. There's some controversy on that. Another reason people don't take medication is because they're just not organized enough to do it. Another reason is they don't know that they need to take it at that moment, and that's not agnosia. And other people decide not to take it. So there are all kinds of reasons. But I have a question. Do you have a reference for only 4 people in California and 3 counties with Laura's Law have used it? And may I ask if anybody else has a reference at their fingertips? Because I do.
I have it here. So the Department of Mental Health produced the Laura's Law report on July of 2011. Shows, you guys haven't had a look at it, I would definitely recommend it.
Sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Yeah, close to the mic.
Sorry.
Close, well.
The Department of Mental Health issued the Laura's Law official report as per the statute on July of 2011, and it is available as a PDF through the internet.
Which has the statistics about the use.
Which clearly shows the 4. It's a study of the 4 individuals treated under the program.
I once read also a study, that people attribute people with mental health issues and problems specifically not taking medication. And I read an interesting study that like 50% of the people that start on antibiotics, by the time they start feeling well, stop taking them. They don't go for the 10 days or the 2 weeks. So it's not because of our quote mental illness, which is like the rest of society. I guess that's my big issue is about these myths of violence and the myth of incompetence. And that is so difficult in terms of stigma and discrimination for us to deal with. We are either treated like we're going to be violent or treated like children and patronized. People are either wanting to lock us up because we're going to do something bad or take care of us in spite of us.
What about the people in jail?
Okay, any more questions?
I actually will just have a brief comment / question. I'm Liz Fuller, and I'm thinking about this argument that you made that I've heard at other mental health proceedings about the incidence of violence in the population of mentally ill people. And I think the concern, the real issue is not that there's a belief. I don't believe that there's a widespread belief that all mentally ill people are violent or prone to violence. I think the great public safety concern is with the very small number of people who are violent, who amass weapons and commit spectacular acts of violence that jeopardize law enforcement and innocent people and so on. The incident in Tucson, there was an incident in Mendocino County last year or the year before. These are tragic outcomes for everyone concerned, including the individual who ends up either dead or incarcerated for committing these terrible acts. And so I think it's, I guess I understand your points and I appreciate your advocacy very much, but I do think that those cases can't be minimized or ignored or kind of swept under the rug. On some level, you have to recognize that those are mentally ill people who did commit these terrible acts of violence that actually, I think, in many ways contribute to stoking concerns about mentally ill people in general.
But then you are creating laws for everyone based on a few instances, which is not the best way of developing policy.
But except,
For a few percentage, a little percentage, you're creating laws generally. I'm just talking about policy for everyone.
But Ms. Jacobs' comments make clear that Laura's law isn't applied to everyone. It's something that you have to pass through a large number of procedural hurdles. And it does seem to me to have the potential to reach those very problematic cases.
In New York, you know, it's been used not for people, which is interesting again, not for people who have been violent, but as a discharge tool. So although it was propagated and promoted to address people, quote, mentally ill people who are violent, it hasn't been used in that way. It's been used as a discharge tool. And I know I will talk at least to the person in New York that he pushed Kendra off a subway platform. His name was Goldstein, Andrew Goldstein, and he had repeatedly been seeking services. So Kendra's law would not have applied to him. Voluntary services might have. He had tried to admit himself in the hospitals and pleaded for services. You know, there's a disagreement. And I know that I'm passionate, but I'm passionate more about those myths and using those myths to pursue a legislative end than even the legislative end.
Okay, thank you. 3.3, move to 3.2.
May I clarify the definition? I think I'm possibly the only physician in the group who can clarify what the concept is of anosognosia.
Could you say, you will have your chance in the public comment. You will have a chance in
I
the
did want to
public
speak
comment.
anyway, but I'd like
Yes.
to put this concept to rest at some point.
Okay, moving on to 3.2, public comment. Due to the large number of people here to make comments, we are asking you to fill out a comment card and give it to my staff, Helena Brooks. This, and I would like to emphasize that the public comment is only for this item. So if you are here for another issue, please ask the clerk to hold your name.
No tasers.
Please come up to the podium as you call your name. And you have 2 minutes to
I
address.
don't think everybody's going to be speaking about tasers here, folks. Finally. It's tasers, right? That's what people are talking. People are speaking about the taser issue. Good. That's why I'm here.
I'm going to speak directly into the mic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, I'm Eduardo Vega. I'm the Executive Director of the Mental Health Association of San Francisco. I also sit on the board of the Mental Health Association in California, and I'm the California Mental Health Services Oversight and Accountability Commissioner. As you know, I talked to the Executive Committee. I was a little surprised that this issue was being brought to the board. I think it's good to have a healthy public debate about Laura's Law and things like assisted outpatient treatment, which many of us are really concerned about, the involuntary commitment part of it. Our community in San Francisco has talked about programs and involuntary commitment process several times, including prior to my being here. And I think that we pretty much decided that that's really not what San Francisco needs. The department has approached the problem or the issue of people needing a sort of an extra level of care, which we certainly have in San Francisco with a rather innovative approach. It still has some problems, and I think there are still some things to be worked out about it. But I do want to point out that regardless of the merits of this particular program, it is interesting when you hear Ms. Jacobs or proponents of the project speak about the availability of the mental health director to make individual interventions. So, yes, in Nevada County, 4 people, and you can see the statistics here, 4 people have been served, as they say, by this program. And it's pretty unique because their mental health director goes to lunch with their Department of Corrections officer and with their county judge and talks about these things. And they can work with people in a very close way, and there may be some benefits to that. Mental Health Association of California, or of San Francisco, like most mental health associations, has been an advocate against abusive, coercive, and demeaning practices in mental health for over 100 years.
Thank you.
Our position remains the same on that.
Mr. Vega, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, please.
Larson.
Thank you.
2 minutes.
Oh, I didn't expect to be called so soon. Hi, Wendy. I'm a consumer. I've been through all the medications, and I've had ECT. And the only time that what changed me and benefited me was coming to California, coming to San Francisco, having voluntary services, having peer support. And now I work as an advocate. And I work with some of the people you're addressing with these kinds of laws, and I can tell you that what you need is you need consumers working with consumers, you need outreach, you need love and kindness, you need to be welcoming, and we need to be the center of the services. The consumer needs to be the center of the services, and we're developing really good peer programs, and I think all of this is going to benefit the people in the community that will not come forward and will not seek services, because we can work with them. I work with Spirit Mentors, which was a self-help drop-in center for people that had mental disabilities that would not go to regular services. And they were capable of being served, and they were capable of being listened to. And usually if they had an objection to the medication, it was because of an effect of the medication or the attitude of the person providing the medication. It's this experience we have. So let's not rush to judgment here on this issue, and let's continue to support the MHSA programs and do what we're doing in San Francisco and in Alameda County. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeremy Miller.
Good evening. My name is Jeremy Miller. I work for the Ethan Stelly Foundation. Among my many roles is as a crisis counselor. However, I'm speaking to you tonight not just from a professional capacity, but from a personal capacity. I have family members that I deal with on a regular basis that fit the definitions put forward as being sufficient to compel someone under Laura's law to compulsory medication. One in particular that comes to mind has been in and out of various systems, the jail systems, the psychiatric ward systems, for her entire life. And she would rather die than return to one. And last couple times that she has been last couple times that she's been compelled by law to return to these facilities, she's attempted to take her life both times. Yet outside of these systems, she is functional and successful in her life as a person suffering from mental health disabilities. From my professional experience, I work quite often with individuals that experience mental health crises. And the myriad of different treatment that we work out together is effective. Effective enough, not 100%, but effective enough to run a strong argument against anything compulsory.
Thank you.
Teresa Resquin.
Good evening. It's Pasquini, Pasquini, and thank you. Okay. So thank you to the San Francisco County Mental Health Board for holding this important meeting tonight. I'm a mental health commissioner for Contra Costa County, and I am an advocate and partner with Rose King, who is one of those family members that Ms. Inman spoke about that helped co-author Prop 63. And I don't think she would agree on the implementation success of Prop 63, neither do I. I am speaking tonight, however, only as a mom, and my own daughter is named Laura and is a resident of Contra Costa County, and she asked me to come and read the letter that I wrote to Governor Brown recently, so I'm going to do that quickly, hopefully within time. This was written August 31st, 2012. My son was arrested inside Napa State Hospital 3 days ago and is sitting in the jail for the first time since he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. He was in Napa State Hospital because he has been failed by every private and public section of the California mental health system. He was at Napa State Hospital on a civil commitment, which is very rare these days. My son was in Napa State Hospital in part due to his lack of insight about his illness. He doesn't think he's ill. He would not go to the mental health wellness centers because he doesn't think he's mentally ill. The amount of money to pay for a bed at Napa State is approximately $200,000 versus $25,000 to provide intensive outpatient treatment. Now there will be associated court and jail fees. The local costs are too high, the human waste to my son is too high, my family has suffered immeasurably for over 13 years because of the criminal neglect of the community mental health system.
Thank you.
Brody.
Hello, Mental Health Board Member Delphine Brody, member of the California Network of Mental Health Clients. I'm a mental health client survivor myself from San Francisco. I've lived here for 12 years, was homeless on these streets. And I can tell you that court treatment and especially coercive programs where people go before a judge and being told what to do don't work. I can tell you that the costs for such programs are unjustifiable. And that these programs create many more problems than they solve. They create intense distrust in the community. They create the type of divisiveness that you heard Saladin speak about. They create intense trauma and despair, as you heard another gentleman just speak about, in the people that are subjected to these treatments. In New York State, African Americans are disproportionately subject to this type of program at a rate of 5 African Americans to 1 white person. Latinos 2.5 times as likely to be subject to voluntary outpatient commitment under Kennedy's law in New York. The costs are exponential. It was for this very reason that in so many counties that this has come before over the past 10 years, the Board of Supervisors either voted no or didn't even want to go there with an action item. In San Francisco, we've defeated this 3 times already. This is the 4th time. The last time was 2 years ago. How many times do we have to bring this before San Francisco before it becomes clear that this is just not going to work for San Francisco? Yes, San Francisco has the Chronicle and other major newspapers who seem to have a problem with the high visibility of homeless people who are struggling with poverty, who are struggling with trauma, who are struggling with racism and with other oppressions. We need to not let their struggle be painted with anosognosia.
Justice Richard Boyce.
Hi, Boyce Smith. I'm a physician and chairman of the board of NAMI San Francisco. Thank you.
Speak closer to the mic, please.
Thank you, Mental Health Board, for entertaining this issue. As you can hear, it's really divisive, and I'm sorry for that. There is a population, there's no question, there's a population of folks who are falling through the cracks, who are evolving through hospitals and evolving through jails. And this is a small population, that's why it's really kind of almost ludicrous that we're spending so much time as where we should be trying to figure out creatively the bundle of services that are needed for those who are in a difficult situation, constantly being jailed, constantly going off to Napa State or wherever it is. And so I hope in these deliberations that we end up, there are not enough services, there's not enough comprehensive look at the services. Having spent time with just trying to implement the crisis intervention training for the police department, we're recognizing all the disconnects between the 911 dispatch and then where the police officer is supposed to take the person in the middle of the 5150 and how they're going to come out and be followed up. There's not enough case management services. So there is a population that is falling through the cracks. Spend any time in the jail, spend any time in San Francisco General, spend any time talking to the police or actually responding to the 5150, and you'll find out that there is a population of revolving, never treated, never accepting their diagnosis population that needs to be helped. I respect and totally understand the consumer advocacy piece. We need to understand that. I think Laura Jacobs gave a calm, reasoned approach to the safeguards that need to be put in place. But we do need to recognize that there's a population going with huge crisis problems going unmet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bruce Allion. Allison.
Next item.
Pardon? Next item? Okay. Malin Lois. Malin V.A. Lois.
My name is Malin Valo. I'm with the Coalition for Justice and Accountability, but apart from that, I would like to point out that I'm not getting paid by any organization or company remotely related to mental health, so I'm here purely as a concerned citizen and family member that had some experiences that illuminated my point of view. And while I agree with the previous speaker that there's a problem, I think the problem is being very inappropriately addressed by involuntary commitment. And things, first of all, it assumes that medications are what will cure mental illness, and it has been far from proven, or we would have no more mentally ill people. You know, and the truth is we have more and more. the problems of homelessness are better addressed by providing homes than not medication. I mean, I really don't see what that would solve. And actually, the reason I'm here is because I had the amazing experience of a family member being 5150 by a sister in New Jersey who had no knowledge of the situation and who actually managed to convince the police to come to the house. And 5150, him, based on some hearsay that she supposedly had heard something from the mother. I mean, you know, whatever laws there are, it's already pretty bad. You know, we don't need to toughen them. And I actually kind of wonder, you know, who do they benefit? Because I don't see them benefiting the consumers, but the money trail seems to point to big pharma. I mean, who's going to be paying this $22,000? Yeah, I mean, what I saw in my family member's case, it was going to come of the copay and the insurance. Well, guess what? The insurance is going to get tired of you and drop you, say you have a pre-existing condition, or and then you'll be saddled with a copay. And you know, obviously, you know, if there is a court order, well, you know, that's a very good way to compel people to pay. Thank you.
Sharon Madison.
Sharon Madison. I'm speaking today, and I wish I would have taken a little more time to prepare, but I need to speak. I'm a family member, which I would like to give the view of the family member of a person that has mental illness. And I have a son that we've been dealing with for over 30 years. I have a sister that we've been dealing with for over 35 years. And I now have a daughter-in-law that we have been dealing with for 2 years. It is very, very evident that there is a group of mentally ill people that are going to have treatment that is not voluntary. There is no getting around it. We started out in the 80s. We have tried every kind of treatment there is available. The treatment that was recommended in this little newsletter, opponents of implementation of the law support self-directed, safe, humane, and healing approaches. We've exhausted those kinds of things. There is a group of people that are not going to respond. I teach a family-to-family program, 12-week program. I've had over 200 families so far in the last 4 years. These families are all in the same position. These families want to help their loved one, but their loved ones do not believe that they are ill. And these families are put in the horrible position of waiting for the unthinkable to happen before that they can get any treatment for their loved one.
Thank you.
Carmen Sinas, next issue. Simon, next issue. Oh, next issue. Okay. Martin Fox.
$7,000 suicides in the last year amongst our military and veterans. You talk about treatment resistance? The Department of Homeland Security considers me a potential domestic terrorist. You talk about stigma! That's my training. I'm the former Chief Legal Officer of the Special Court Martial Committee Authority of Fort Worth, California. In 73, 74, and 75. I had over 2,200 servicemen a month being returned to my care through the Monterey County Sheriff's Department's jail over in Salinas. I had to build a new section for it. I never prosecuted one soldier who was mentally ill. Not one! And I'm not in favor of anything that gives them a chance to get away.
Can't
Thank
hear
you.
you. Can't hear you.
The problem is the system has no alternative for people to refuse treatment. Full service partnerships don't do it. Mental Health Services Act doesn't do it. All of the hyperbole and overstatement doesn't do it. Laura's Law is not forced treatment. It is not forced drugs. Those are overstatements. That's hyperbole. That's a lawyer's trick, Mr. Mayor. Help our veterans. We got 30,000 of them coming back from the wars. That's why you're seeing more of them, and you're going to see more of them. They're already in the jails. It's time to start addressing the issue. It's not going to go away.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Bakian rights.
George Bakirita. I'm a physician, psychiatrist. I've practiced here in this neighborhood for 35 years.
Just stay closer to the
I'm sorry, I'm George Bakirita. I'm a physician and psychiatrist. I've practiced here in Mission and Kentucky for about 32 years. I left and been working part-time with the County of San Mateo. In the last 2 months, I have taken 2 people to court. Both of them had more than 30 cycles of having been hospitalized, and then after a few months released, because both of them own their own homes, which has been left to them by family members being kind. As a result, they don't fit the criteria. These people are going to cycle and cycle until their brains are shrunken. And yes, we are dealing with a neurological disease. We like to call it psychiatric, but that's 19th century. This is a neurological disease, and the term anosognosia is a term from neurology. And if you want to get it, you can get this Googled, and you can learn a lot about it. Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, William O. Douglas, experienced this illness and was removed from the Supreme Court in 1973. You find it rather entertaining to read this, because it happens in neurology, particularly in cases of people who lose a limb, traumatic brain injuries, and in things like Parkinson's disease. It is the gnosis is knowledge of self. Is a lack of knowledge of self. And the term comes from neurology, not from psychiatry. I hate to tell you, you are dealing with a neurological illness, and we are quickly moving into the 21st century. We've got to get out of 19th and 20th century thinking about this illness. If we keep doing what we've been doing in the past, we're going to have more and more suicides and more problems. At least the military is trying.
Thank you.
Trying.
Dale Snar.
Hi. I've been advocating for Laura's laws to be implemented since 2003. At that time, my only child was 28 years old and had been hospitalized 22 times, all of them for homicidal ideation. I was hopeful that court mandate for assertive outpatient treatment could help turn his life around. 10 years later, his future looks hopeless. He has now had more than 65 hospitalizations. Between November 16th, 2010 and today, he spent more than 250 days in the hospital at $1,000 a day. Laura's Law cost estimate is $25,000 per year per client. In 2007, he was manic for 6 months but did not meet criteria to be 5150, and he tried to kill me. If he was under Laura's Law, I would have had the power to have him evaluated before this happened. Instead, he wound up in jail, where he was taught to use crack, meth, and heroin, and was told where to get these drugs. I've now had more than 8 Tarasoff warnings, and my husband has had 3. I've been told to make him homeless so that he learns the consequences of his bad decisions. I refuse to do this. I've allowed him. He is now living in my home. I'm told I'm an enabling mother, and I'm blamed just the way mothers were blamed for causing schizophrenia back when NAMI was started in the 1970s. The voluntary programs cherry-pick the clients they believe to do well. CBHS has a rule that you cannot repeat residential treatment if you failed within 13 months. Conservatorship takes away all of a person's legal rights. Under Laura's law, my son's treatment providers would be held accountable for his care or lack of care. He would be able to complain to the judge when, one, his housing specialist did not meet with him. Thank you.
Are you speaking on this issue or the next one?
I'm here tonight on that particular item as a consumer of the mental health system. I've had 4 5150 since my son was murdered by SFPD in 2001, age 7. On the first hospitalization, he led to 5150 where I was given Cogentin. Cogentin gave me a horrible case of tardive dyskinesia. I know to this day some people have permanent tardive dyskinesia. And the last 5150 led to being put on Taser, who was packed 45 pounds on my older diabetic body, which is a great health danger for me. I remember James Key, the former chair of this board, who had grave concerns about Laura's law. But he felt at the time, well, we are going under a budget deficit and we don't have to worry about implementation. Yet, sadly, this is again in front of you today. To me, Laura's law is a dangerous slide of the police state towards criminalization of differently mentally able people. Thank you.
Martin Fox.
That's the next subject.
Brian A. Clark. Okay.
As you said, my name is Brian. I'm not a resident, I'm a visitor of your beautiful city, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I just wanted to voice that I think that it's wrong for the government to have the right to administer health care to individuals who don't desire it. And I also wanted to quickly comment that I think it is wrong and casts a shadow over governmental proceedings for individuals to use violent tones of voice and gestures in order to intimidate people who have an opposite opinion. I think it's just undemocratic and disrespectful. Thank you.
Mary Harriser. Mary Harriser. Oh.
Hi, my name is Harry Pariser. I've been living in San Francisco for over a quarter century, and the only person I've experienced that I've read that endorses tasers is, not tasers, but Laura's law is C.W. Nevius, who really has a lot of credence on this, given the fact that he's a former sports writer. I haven't seen any evidence that Laura's law works, and I was at an event where Lee Lee was a couple of years ago, and I asked him the question. He couldn't explain to me how it works step by step. Now, how does this actually work in practice in the field? And nobody's been able to explain that. And I think people more knowledgeable than me have already said it doesn't work. So why don't we start looking for other solutions? Is it because there's some money to be made from this? And that's what we're concerned about. That's usually behind most of these things, whether it be tasers or sit-lie or whatever. It's always money, money, money. And when you really look, this woman speaking before us talked about the drugs in the prison, why aren't we looking at that? You know, why is it we're avoiding the issues, the things that really cause a lot of these social problems that are expensive for us? You know, just like, you know, you don't cure, it's better not to have someone with lung cancer in the hospital. It's better to have them stop smoking beforehand, just like we should start with programs in our schools and so forth. It's causing this, bringing a sort of police fascistic forced medication onto people in this culture is not a good precedent to set, nor does I don't think it works from what everyone has told me that's knowledgeable about it. Thank you.
Thank
My name is Candy, and let me tell you, anosognosia is real. Our son has anosognosia, and he has been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. He does not believe he's ill, and therefore he would not accept treatment in the 4 years that he cycled in and out of the hospitals. He now sits at Napa State Hospital incompetent to stand trial and accused of the murder of an older gentleman and a father, a grandfather. His family suffers now, as we do. Our son's life has been forever changed. Our lives have been forever changed. We could not get help in this system. If we had had Laura's Law, there might have been a chance that it could have saved our son's life. He was not dangerous before his illness, but the paranoia and the daily things that he lived with, not being able to sleep, not being able to think, not being able to eat because he thought he was being poisoned. Nobody can live like this, and we should not allow this to go on. This is inhumane to me. Remember the mom with schizophrenia that threw her 2 children into the bay about a year or 2 ago? Laura's Law could have stopped that. How can we let tragedies like this continue? It will not cost our system money. It will save money if that's what it's about. The revolving hospital stays, the police that are used, the 5150s, the jail cost. Our jails are full of people that are ill. Our counties will save money, but more importantly, we need to save lives, and we need to stop these tragedies. And I'm sorry that somebody yelled, but you know what? You don't live with this. It's a horrible illness, and our families need help.
you.
Katera A.
Good evening, my name is Katera Aslami. I want to first say that care and compassion is the key to recovery, and aggressive and disrespectful behavior is not. I am the executive director of a consumer-run organization, Peers Envisioning and Engaging in Recovery Services. And I want to share with you guys a program that is hugely impacting our community and very effective. And we partner with psychiatric emergency room in Alameda County and John George Psychiatric Pavilion. And the program that I'm talking about is the peer mentorship program. And people that have been hospitalized before, go through a training and become peers and engage with people that are in the hospital currently, people that are been hospitalized 2 times, 6 months prior to joining this program. So they have been in the hospital several times. And the data that we've collected after this to date is a 71% reduction in rehospitalization for those individuals that are involved in this peer mentorship program. And this is about giving hope to people. I've been there, I know it's challenging. We may have different opinions of whether you accept a label or don't accept a label, but I treat you as a human being, and I can say there are ways to maintain your wellness when you're out there. And I understand that there are challenges when you're, I'm a family member also, and when someone is struggling with something, if I lose hope, that person can feel it and understand, and I can't engage with them then in a therapeutic or meaningful way if I don't believe in them. So I just want to share with you guys that that is really important, that we believe in recovery and that we share stories of hope. Thank you.
Valeria Yarbrough.
Hi, I'm Delia. I'm a volunteer with the Coalition on Homelessness. I've also worked in San Francisco as a service provider for homeless youth, some of whom did experience mental illness. And I would just like to underline the fact that the waiting list in San Francisco for free voluntary services are so large. They're so long. And what we need here is, of course, not only access to housing, and not only discussions that, instead of stereotyping and stigmatizing, really deal honestly with the lack of resources in our city. So we need to improve access to free, voluntary, culturally appropriate services here in San Francisco. Thank you.
Michael Gauss, thoughts?
Good evening. Thanks for having us here. Something else prepared to say and speak on. My name is Michael Gosler, Deputy Director with the Mental Health Association of San Francisco. This has been an issue with 1421 and Laura's Law that I've been involved with for several years. I just want to make a point tonight that in my darkest moments, when I was in crisis, when I was struggling, what got me through that was the support of my peers and holding on to hope. What was the most terrifying thing to me in my darkest moments and in my time of crisis was that choice being taken away from me and that self-determination not being open to me. That was what's truly terrifying to me. What gave me hope was the knowledge that I could recover, I could hold on to hope voluntarily. And that's why I'm so opposed to this. To 1421 and have that. One other note, I mean, as far as alternatives and other things, we at the Mental Health Association have proposed several other options on the table. We're truly committed to being a part of a larger group of stakeholders where we're all included, such as the Mental Health Services Act. One thing that we've been working on quite a bit recently is something called peer respite, which is an alternative to hospitalization. This is done in other parts of the country, the East Coast. Sorry, Mike. And we'd love to explore that here. And that's true peer-to-peer support. People who've been hospitalized, who've been through crisis, supporting other peers. Thank you so much.
Rebecca? Rivera?
Hello. My name is Colleen Rebecca. I'm a social worker, but I'm here today not in a professional capacity, but because I'm a person who's living with mental illness. I've lost my fiance to suicide back in 1995. He was suffering with mental illness, and I have many beloved family members who suffer with mental illness. So I live in this and I feel so much of the pain that's being expressed in this room today, and I want to honor that. I also want to point out that through my work as a social worker and an advocate over the past 7 years, we've been fighting really hard to stop the cuts to voluntary mental health service programs, both at the state and the city level. And I want to remind this board that since 2008-2009 budget year, we've actually seen a $785 million reduction to voluntary mental health treatment at the state level. At the city level, we've seen a $32 million reduction to voluntary behavioral health treatment for people who are indigent, who don't have any access to insurance. Many of these people are homeless and can't access the Medi-Cal program because they don't have dependents. I have been really disappointed by the divisiveness and the disrespect that has come up as a result of this conversation today. We in this room should be allies instead of screaming at each other and pointing fingers and trying to play a game of who's suffered more and who's had more problems. We should be working together to restore these cuts and to make sure that the people that we love can have the most culturally competent, sensitive care, regardless of ability to pay. One of the tenets of Laura's Law is that there must be adequate voluntary mental health services before anything like this can even be contemplated being put into place. Thank you.
Zanakowski?
Good evening, honorable board members. My name is Richard Krzyżanowski. I am the chairman of a consumer-run organization called the California Client Action Work Group, and I am also a person with a disability, as it so happens, a psychiatric disability. You know, if somebody comes up to me and says, we're going to want you to do something, and actually, we're going to kind of really make you do something that you may not want to do, but you know it's okay. It's for your own good. A red flag goes up, and I tend to get a little suspicious. And then if I ask them why, and the reasons they give may not have anything to do with what I've actually done, but with what I might do, or what might be done to me, I'm doubly suspicious. Already as a member of the community of people who are often called mentally ill, or folks with psychiatric disabilities, it's the only disability or illness in this country that I know of for which you can have your liberties taken away from you. And in California, we have, I think, fairly good and clear, reasonable laws that have procedures for having this accomplished. I used to be a patient's rights advocate professionally, I know. I want to say that the principle of equal protection under the law, which is a constitutional guaranteed right, is something that we all enjoy, and the borders for that need to be jealously protected, because the consequences of letting that boundary slip down that slippery slope affect us all, and we all have an interest in protecting them. Thank you.
Hello, members of the board. My name is Mark Kowalski. I hold a PhD in electrical engineering and have suffered from schizoaffective disorder with polysubstance dependence for the past 20 years. And I would like to address the involuntary psychiatric hold system, as known popularly as 5150 and 5250. I believe this system has taken us back to the early days of psychiatry, where the psychiatric system was used to oust unwanted people from society. I say that from my personal experience. The first time I was 5150, my wife had kicked me out of the house after we had agreed to a legal separation. She knew where I was staying. Something she said to the police made them suspicious that I could not take care of myself. When the police discovered that she had taken all my money, of course, I qualified for the bar of unable to care for myself. Now, ironically, 2 years later, I was actually suicidal. And I went to El Camino Hospital, and I begged them to admit me. And they turned me away. And they said, there's nothing we can do for you. So, those two examples kind of show that when the 5150 is used in a vindictive way, it seems to be put into effect. When it's used in a therapeutic way, it tends to be turned away. Now, just last Thursday, over an estate dispute over my parents' estate, my sister called the sheriff, and I opened the door for the welfare check, and I was inebriated as an alcoholic in relapse, and I spent the night in the hospital. And I don't understand the therapeutic value. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good evening, Board. My name is Mickey Shipley. I'm a consumer advocate from a long time ago, and still do it, even at my age. Okay. I'm not here to take sides. Okay, I'm not either for it or against it. I am a consumer with an undiagnosed daughter living in Alameda County. Okay. I want to thank the board for the opportunity to present both sides and to educate us members of the public on Laura's Law, okay, and the differences between the different sides. Okay. As Sally mentioned, several years ago under the MSA, we came together as a unified group and learned to collaborate, okay, in putting services in place for our fellow consumers. Okay. That's the most important thing in this day and age, is to have voluntary services for our consumers to learn how to recover from their psychiatric disability. I'm not going to use the word mental illness, okay? That's what I was, stigmatized with when I was growing up. Okay, I have a psychiatric disability. I can manage it, and I manage it very well, thank you, without medication. I have been off medication for 3.5 years now. Okay. I'm bipolar, okay, and I'm very, very active as a consumer, okay, and nobody can tell me.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe this is the last speaker, so we move on to 4.0, action items. Okay, action items. The items below.
Moving on to talk about tasers, police use of tasers on the mentally ill.
Okay.
All right. I guess for me, my scenario is that I just think that is the worst situation possible, where you fear a government or any agency to put you into some type of hold where you have no type of resources or knowledge of how long you're going to be there, where you're going to be able to get out, anything. Considering some of the drugs that they're using, many of them are psych drugs, and for me, they cause. I started taking one, it triggered an epileptic seizure. It creates several sexual side effects. It has lots of side effects. I'd say maybe about a year ago, I went to the hospital for a heart palpitation or something, an abnormal heartbeat, and I was given a psych drug. I didn't even, once I got home, I had to look it up, and then I realized he gave me a psych drug. So I just see, I just see something wrong. So the Lori's Law is wild. And then the whole thing about the racism in the Lori's Law, I just see a big problem here. And with all the budget cuts going on, I just see they're gonna cut all the checks and balances as well. So they might lock somebody up, and all this defense that people are talking about in the checks and balances that people are gonna get, they're probably gonna be cut, and then we're gonna have one protector for like 50, 100, 200 clients. So, I mean, as a person who deals with government.
Thank you. Okay. 4.0. The items listed below will be voted on by the board, so we request public comment prior to voting. The first item is approval of the minutes from the last board meeting, and the second item is a resolution about the use of tasers. Commander Ali, who oversees the crisis intervention team for the San Francisco Police Department, is here to respond to questions the board or members of the public may have. I understand that people have strong feelings about this subject, but please keep your comments to the subject of the resolution and do not make rude or inappropriate remarks about police officers or anyone else. You have 2 minutes in which to make your comment. 4.2, proposed resolution. Okay, is there any public comment for the minutes of the, okay. Seeing none, public comment is closed.
Now we're here for the issues of tasers.
4.2, be it resolved that the minutes of the Mental Health Board meeting of October 10, 2012 be approved as submitted.
Up here in a minute.
All in favor say aye, all opposed say nay. Aye. Thank you. Resolution. Ms. Brooks will read the entire resolution. If board members have changes to the wording, we will vote on its change first. When all changes have been approved, we will vote on the entire resolution.
Okay, the resolution that the Mental Health Board urges the San Francisco Police Commission and San Francisco Police Department to oppose the adoption of electric shock weapons, tasers, for their SFDPH CIT, Crisis Intervention Team officers. Whereas the proposed change in the SFPD's use of force governing policies to permit the issuance of tasers to CIT trained officers is contrary to the goals and directives governing CIT in both form and substance. And whereas a California study showed the rate of sudden in-custody deaths increasing 6.4 times and the rate of firearm deaths increasing 2.3 times in the first full year of taser deployment with no corresponding change in officer injury or death. Whereas the risk of taser injuries and or death is heightened for the mentally and emotionally ill who in a crisis may be potentially unable to connect actions to consequences and may resist police even in the face of stepped up force. And whereas research has found patients taking prescribed antipsychotic medications are already at increased risk of sudden cardiac death if tasered, whereas people in states of acute agitation resulting from mental illness have been associated with unexplained deaths in custody. Whereas the Memphis, Tennessee Police Department CIT curriculum has been used to inform and create the SFPD curriculum since May 2001, and in 2011, Memphis, Tennessee PD consulted to SFPD, and Memphis still refuses to use tasers as they have confidence in their CIT training for de-escalation without the use of tasers. Whereas the American Civil Liberties Union has raised concerns about their use, as has the British Human Rights Organization Resist Cardiac Arrest. And whereas the disproportionate use of tasers against minorities has been well documented by the ACLU and also in the performance audit of the City of Houston in 2008, resulting in the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division investigation which sustained the findings. And whereas the cost of tasers is prohibitive, costing about $1,000 per unit, including holster and cartridges, plus the cost of equipping each squad car with the necessary defibrillators at triple the cost of a taser, plus hospital visits for subsequent injuries, and possibly litigation costs which have already saddled California taxpayers with over $10 million since 2009. And therefore be it resolved that the Mental Health Board of San Francisco urges the San Francisco Police Commission and the SFPD to oppose the adoption of tasers to SFPD CIT trained officers.
Okay, then, public comment.
Okay, Joyce Yamato? Yamato?
Can you hear me? My name is Joyce Yamamoto. I'm Sansei and a member of the No Low Vision community here in San Francisco. I come before you this evening. I am not a professional mental health practitioner or researcher, so I have no facts or stats or okay, I lost my place. I have no facts or stats, pros or cons, regarding taser weapons. I am here because I'm a citizen, an ordinary citizen, with fears and concerns born from news reports. Are you there? Is that who I'm talking to? Okay.
We're listening.
Because of news reports of police abuse using these taser weapons, especially against the low vision community that I'm a part of. Just in October, there was a report about police tasing a blind man because they mistook his white cane for a samurai sword. Does this look like a sword, let alone a samurai sword? Sword. How do you say it? I'm here to ask you to please support this resolution and have this as the first step towards a more caring and just approach to mental health crisis in our most vulnerable community.
Thank you.
Carmen Simon? Simon?
Can everyone hear? Hi. So thank you to the board for having this hearing. I think this is an important resolution. And I'll tell you, I'm here at the behesting of Misha and the Idris Stilley Foundation. I'm a community activist with a 5-year history as a mental health worker. And I just want to talk to you very briefly about some of the things that I learned in mental health. De-escalation. I think anyone who has any kind of mental health training or background has been trained in the art of being in crisis with someone, matching them at their level of anxiety and trying to de-escalate that and bring that down. Now, right now, I'm in pretty good mental health, but if I were in a crisis situation with law enforcement and I had a gun pulled in my face, the ability to discern that that's a taser, a so-called non-lethal weapon, versus one of lethality, that seems very hard to fathom. I want to talk a little bit about proportionality in general as a concept, and I have to say this was a really frustrating thing to research, to look at all these statistics about tasers and why they are not a lethal or non-lethal weapon. So I just want to talk a little bit about James Clifton Barnes, 37. Struggling but in handcuffs, tasered by Marine Deputy Kenneth Kubler, died a few days later. This is March 19, 2012. Greg Williams, September 11, 2009. double amputee of legs and arms, tasered while having 3 police on him for.
Folks, I have to shut off for just a minute. I'll
taser
restart it in just a
and,
second.
had